between. And once there would be a little bit more people, then I will hop off.
Hello.
Before we start, Alhamdulillah, how are you doing? Before we formally start, can I request us to go on a speaker view? It would be better for live YouTube telecast.
Levi, can you change that?
Can you please repeat?
Can we go on a speaker view, or are we already on speaker view in YouTube and Zoom? I just changed to speaker view, so I think we should be on speaker view now. Good?
Yes.
We will formally start. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome to another Zoom and live YouTube session by YPC APPNA. Big thank you to everyone who could join us today, especially on Sunday morning. Slight change in plan. Unfortunately, Dr. Namra Jamshed, who was supposed to join us, she couldn't join because of an emergency, and I will be covering for her as a moderator / speaker. Let's do a brief introduction of our panelist speakers, starting with Dr. Sarakiani. She's here. She's a graduate of Al Khan University. She did residency at UT Southwestern, and she's program director of internal medicine at Texas Tech University at Midland. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Kiani.
Thank you so much. Is it okay if are we addressing each other as Dr. Tariq or Dr. Naveed?
Whatever you want.
No, I just wanted to make sure that I was appropriate. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Tariq, for introducing me. I'm very happy.
You can call me Umar.
That's okay. I just wanted to make sure I was appropriate.
Sure.
A few other things that I wanted to share with anyone who is watching this as well is, in addition to being a residency program director, I'm also the chair of the Curriculum and Education Promotional Committee at the Texas Tech School of Medicine. So a big part of my job involves writing the curricular contents for, what the School of Medicine is going to be. And actually, the structured evaluative letters are something that is very important for us. I also have I'm also an innovator and entrepreneur. So my research and my personal interests in terms of medical education also involved making software applications that help learners as well as their educators collect competency data. So we have a company, and we are actually working with Indiana University, Texas Tech University, and UT Southwestern to pilot these. I wanted to share that as a conflict of interest disclosure as well.
MashaAllah, very nice, very nice. We are so glad and we are honored that you're here. Next, we have Dr. Sadiq Naveed. He's the program director of psychiatry in Hartford Healthcare, and he is leading our Young Physicians Committee of APPNA. Thank you very much, Sadiq Bhai, for joining us on Sunday morning while you were rounding.
Thank you, Umar. And I think we can call each other by first name. That should be okay. The one correction, I'm currently with Hartford Healthcare, but I'm in the moment of transitioning to ECHN as really, sorry, a printer going off behind me. So I will be in and out of the session. I have a morning meeting in next 5 minutes. That's gonna last for 5 minutes, but I'll try to stay for the length of the session. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Sadiq. Next, we have Gulraiz Ahmed. Gulraiz is an assistant professor in internal medicine at Medical College of Wisconsin. He's the chair of YPC Dogana and a member of YPC APPNA with us. He will be joining us shortly. Next, we have Farhan Ahmed. He is assistant professor of infectious disease and critical care medicine at Creighton University. He's co-chair of Young Physicians Committee Kemkana with me and a member of YPC APPNA. Last and definitely the least, my name is Umar Tariq. If you don't know me, I'm vice chair of interventional radiology at UPHC Susquehanna, and I'm chair of YPC Kemkana and member of YPC APPNA with all the other esteemed members here. I also run a website and a YouTube channel, Meridia, for guidance and mentoring of medical students. So moving on with our formal session, I will ask Dr. Kiani, what's your understanding of this new SEL structured evaluation letter? If you can throw a little light on it, please.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Tariq, for asking me. Actually, Omar, you're going by first name. I like that. Okay. And so you can call me Sarah as well. I think that the rationale, actually had the privilege of meeting Dr. Ibrahim and the group that was created this letter. I'm also a part of the AAIM committee that oversees a lot of these things. And so the intention that they had when they had initially started working on this was to increase the reliability and the content that is demonstrated in letters of recommendation for students. So initially, the idea was that every student, different campuses, different faculty have different styles of writing, and they may not know what is the relevant information that program directors like myself require when we are reviewing applications to give them a structure. Now, during the process that they were doing this, COVID happened, and then we had changes with step 1 and then steps 2 CS going to pass fail. And I think that the purpose of the letter evolved perhaps slightly in that setting, because now we needed better metrics of student performance that are missing. Currently, step 2 CK is the only numerical data point that we have. And so the reliance on the MSPE and the LORs that the student is providing and the supplementary application is definitely going to be higher this time. So if they're so important, how do you create a method in which they are standardized in some sense, so that as a program director, I can compare apples and apples instead of apples and oranges? And so I think that was the intention here.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Just a brief reminder to everyone that this entire session is being live telecasted on APPNA Merit's channel, YouTube channel. So we will appreciate if you don't have any questions and you just want to watch the session, if you can also log into our YouTube page and you can just watch everything there. Also, we will request, we always need support and we need help making sure our message reaches a wider audience. So if you can subscribe and subscribe to our APPNA Merit channel and like our video. Okay, and I will quickly add to this. My little experience has been that in late 90s, I had some cousins who started residency. At that time, if you had scores in like 90s, you're set. There is no doubt you won't get a residency. Then CSA came, and then people passed CSA, they got it, and then people who did electives, they will get residency for sure. It doesn't matter if they had a letter of recommendation or not, because nobody was doing electives at that time. So that was the next, in early 2000. After that, everybody was doing electives. So then the letter of recommendation was a big thing that, now people were focusing more on letter of recommendation, where did people have good quality in letter of recommendations. So then I noticed that, okay, people with good letters were getting great residency positions. After that, interestingly, I think in our post, I will say 2012, I noticed a change towards research. The more and more people who had publications, abstracts, case reports, they were considered the stars, and they will get their residency match in like top places. So this has been the evolution of the match process for me. And interestingly, what I noticed is a lot of times, when you ask for letters, there are certain people who will give you a letter that's a 5-liner. And then there are others who will give you a letter that's a 2-page letter. And you don't know, is that because the candidate didn't do good enough? Is that why he's getting a 4 or 5 liner letter of recommendation? Or that person just writes less in his letter? So I believe that was the reason, they came up with this idea that we need to have a structured approach in which we can see, okay, are we asking all the relevant questions that Dr. Kiani as a PD wants to know? That, okay, these are the questions that, she as a PD wants to know when she's judging a candidate. Are all these questions being answered? And are we omitting any unnecessary information? So that was just my understanding why this came into being. All right, do we have Gulrez or Farhan in the session right now? Just want to make sure I get their 2 cents before we move on to the next question.
Assalamu alaikum, Omar bhai, I just joined. Thank you.
Farhan, what's your understanding of structured evaluation letter? What do you think why do we have it?
So I just was looking at this even from the last year. You know, we had a session last year with Royal Hindi Medical College students, and that was the first time when we came across this thing that there will be a structured evaluation letter for the internal medicine residency applicants. So I saw the letter again a couple of weeks ago. I saw this morning again. I think the whole idea was that now writing a whole letter of recommendation is kind of getting generic. This structured evaluation letter, it just goes to the extent that it dissects the whole clinical experience of working under supervision. So if we look into these subcomponents of the structured evaluation letter, it just goes into how an applicant was performing in an inpatient setting, in an outpatient setting, in the critical care setting, what was his interpersonal skills, and how were the communication skills, right? And most of the letter of recommendations, even though there are certain guidelines by ERAS and AMA and ECFMG, all of those have the guidelines of how the letter of recommendation should be structured. But most of the time, you know, things go all over the place. So the idea was to at least hit the key points about an applicant and see where he is. Now, talking specifically about the IMGs, and I think this is where it makes a difference. So the challenge happens when, you know, we get letter of recommendations from our US letter authors just based on our 4 to 8 weeks of observership or elective, right? It doesn't give a whole idea because they did not get an opportunity to see us working as compared to someone like who did an internship back home, like in Pakistan, right? So they were managing patients in ER, they were managing patients in outpatient settings and everything, right? So I think this is a good thing for IMGs, particularly definitely for internal medicine applicants to prove their strength in the clinical aspect, right? Once, and I had I think last week, one of the applicants was trying to figure out how to fill this thing up. And our letter authors back home, like our he finished his whole postgraduate training back home. So his letter author was in a very strong position to write a SEL for him. So they went over each and everything. So that's what I would recommend, that all the IMGs, if they can get it, it's something that our letter authors will prefer to write rather than writing a whole essay about. It's just like click, 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 and you're done. And it will give a high yield information right up front. That's what my take on it.
Thank you very much, Farhan. So coming back to our panelists, so starting with Sarah. So Sarah, please go ahead and tell me that what do you think is the importance of SEL especially for IMGs, since it's optional?
Thank you. And I'm going to add something to, was it Farhan?
Farhan, yeah.
Farhan, okay. Something that Farhan just said, that so actually, because I work with medical students in the US as well, there's some advantages actually to having done an observership. So I'm not really answering your question right now. I just want to add something. So the students that do clinical, during their clinical rotations, when they do IM, it's for usually an 8-week block. And in that 8 week, they're doing inpatient, outpatient. So at a time, they're probably not doing inpatient for more than 3 weeks or so. Within those 3 to 4 weeks, there's multiple attendings that are coming in there. So in a way, IMGs who come for observership, so IMGs who've had really good quality experience with their own physicians back home are at an advantage because they're working with the same person for a good stretch of 4 weeks. Now, the challenge that is for IMGs, coming to your question, is what if the observership was only in an outpatient setting? So then the value of the IM-SEL would it go down because it doesn't have information about the ward or the critical care part of the experience? And so I think the disadvantage of this IM-SEL is that it's not been made specifically with IMGs in mind. It has been made for it to favor the rotation structure of the IM clerkship as it exists in the US. So I think that is perhaps why they have included like a primary and secondary letter writer in there. And so maybe their intention there was for this evaluative letter to be a combination of different. I see that I would think that this would be a very good way to get letters from your own clerkship directors or your chair of departments that you've worked with in your home countries. I don't know if any observer or an elective student from abroad will have an experience with someone in the inpatient, outpatient, and critical care setting to make this good quality letter. So as a PD, would it matter to me if this letter was coming from the home institution versus an American letter writer? Here, the preferences are very different for different people. I cannot talk about other people. For myself, when I applied for residency, even though I had done electives, I actually just used Pakistani LORs, believe it or not. I did not have any American LORs in my application, but the Pakistani LORs that I had were all waived. And later on, I found out that they were very good quality LORs they were personalized. And so I actually don't really differentiate that much. But the quality of the information and the reliability of the information is really important. So sometimes, when you do this again and again, you get a sense of what really is a copy paste kind of LOR versus something that's very personalized. And so if you've had a good quality experience with your own chair of department, or I would recommend using this, this template and having them fill it out to the best of your abilities, because I feel like an observership experience, when you talk about it, it does want you to say what you did, right? It wants you to say what kind of, were you putting in orders? What kind of role were you? So if I was reading an LOR from an American physician, say a nephrologist who had taken, who had a resident, applicant had shadowed them in their clinic for 4 weeks, I wouldn't see that perhaps the details that I would that their home country faculty member could have given them. So I really think that every applicant, for as long as IMGs are concerned, they should reflect on their own experiences and feel like, okay, who is that person who's with whom I've had this breadth of experience, who can really who's like a mentor and who can really write this good quality letter for me.
Thank you very much for that. So do you think it's important for IMGs? I know they say on the website that it's optional. Like if there are IMGs listening to us, would you recommend that they should try their best to get an SEL? It would be very helpful to their application. Okay.
Yes, I would recommend that they at least one of their letters should be in the SEL format.
Okay. And if somebody doesn't have a letter in SEL format, not even one, do you think that's going to hurt them?
I don't think so. It's not like apples and there's so many nuances to your application, right? Your LORs, your personal statement, your scores, your experiences. I don't think it would hurt them, not yet, at least, because it's not been standardized. Is it likely that there's going to be another applicant who's also an IMG who has comparable scores and who has an IMSEL, and I have that, detailed explanation of what they were like? I think in that situation it would, because, say you have 250 on step 1 and 255 on step 2, and you have 3 papers and you have 2 months of observership and someone else also has that. In that situation, it may make a little bit of a difference. At the end of the day, a good quality LOR, even if it's not following this kind of standardized format, I think should also be good enough. I don't think it would hurt anyone to not have it.
Thank you very much for that. Yeah, just to add to that, I think my something that I noticed in past few years, that there was this evolution of I was thinking how things became, the priorities of things changed. So lately, unfortunately, the step 1 score is only pass and fail. I think that was one thing that IMG used to shine in, because we used to have very high scores in IMG as in step 1, and that was one thing that would immediately set us apart. If somebody has 260, 270 as compared to an AMG who has 210, 220s, PTs will like that. That, okay, this is an IMG with very high score, with some research experience, some letters. So now with that extra thing that used to benefit us, it's gone. It's only pass and fail now. So they have to come up with something that is standardized. And I agree with Dr. Kiani that, now IMGs who would have SEL, that SEL could serve as icing on the top. Of course, that's not going to be the whole cake. You still need other credentials. You need good CV, good personal statement, preferably good CK scores, good step 3, get your step 3 done with preferably with good scores. But at the same time, if you have SEL, that is instantly going to set you apart from those IMGs who don't have it. I have a next question for Farhan. By the way, just a quick comment. We are getting some questions. You can post your questions either in a YouTube live chat or in this Zoom session. We will take all the questions at the end once we're done with our sets of questions. Moving on to Farhan, if you're available. If not, then we will have Sarah answer this. If faculty at your med school is not familiar with SEL, how can you teach them and convince them? Like let's say somebody's sitting at K or Rawalpindi Medical College and they have no clue, the faculty doesn't know. How can you convince them? Because it might be overwhelming for somebody who's completely ignorant. And how can you teach them?
No, that's a very good question. A bit more on the SEL. I recall from my internal medicine rotations, at the end of every rotation, I get there's a new innovation response about evaluation of a resident. And I feel that this whole SEL is structured in the same way, the way I evaluate the students and the residents at the end of their internal medicine rotation. The way the points are structured on this SEL, it just tries, the whole idea is to get how strong is an applicant on the clinical aspect, right? Now, on that note, my experience with SEL, requesting an SEL was a lot more easier and better as compared to letter of recommendation. What happens there, and I will just say kind of off-label this thing, if you request your letter author back home, like if you did an internship or house job in Pakistan, and then you request your supervisor to write a letter of recommendation for you, if they don't know what ACGME or ERAS or program directors here are looking for, they will just print some generic thing out of Google and just put it there, until unless you specifically tell them that I want you to highlight this research work, or I did this thing with you. Now, and that's what I found, that the person who I handed over to write an SEL for one of my students, he was more comfortable just doing the click. He said, okay, how was he in his inpatient rotations? I can see that we can either click good, better, excellent, proficient, whatever those options was. He was more comfortable doing this as compared to writing a whole essay about an applicant. And just imagine, if someone is offering, for example, if someone was working in US and now moved back to Pakistan, and people were doing some sort of internship with him and wanted him to write a letter just because he had a US experience at some point in his specialty training. So think about how many letter of recommendations he has to write all throughout, right? 10 or 20 or whatever, right? Now, this SEL gives the liberty of just hitting the right parts there, and it gets done within like 10 minutes. It doesn't need a lot of time to just think about the whole. So I think our supervisors will be comfortable back home. And as I said, again, if someone has done a whole length of internal medicine rotation or like elective in US, and they think their supervisor will be in a position to write a SEL for them, they should try that as well. But again, there are 4 options. You can attach 4 letters, right? You can attach your 3 strong US letter of recommendation, and this SEL can be the 4th one for the IMG applicant. So I see it like that.
Thank you very much, Farhan, for that. So Sarah, I have a question for you. About 10 years ago, 5 years ago, we used to tell students that respect your mentors, respect their time, give them 4 to 6 weeks, preferably tell them in July or early August that you would need their letter of recommendation in September. So give them time. Don't just tell them, all right, I'm applying for MASH next week, or I'm applying for MASH tomorrow, and I need my letter of recommendation. So now this SEL thing being different, it's easier to fill out. It's easier to complete. What do you think is more reasonable time frame to give to mentors to fill out the SEL?
So actually, my experience, I really wanted to ask Farhan how, like, to elaborate a little bit more on his experience about the IMSEL. My experience with our clerkship directors in Texas Tech School of Medicine is that it's much harder. It actually requires more effort and more time and more deliberation. It requires you to really reflect and say, okay, really, how was, although you're clicking through it, perhaps if you did quite a few of them, then you'd know, you'd be familiar with the letter, and so it may make it faster. But our faculty have found this a bit more difficult to adopt, and they're not happy about it. So the first thing is, I don't necessarily think this is easier. At least that's not been my experience. I take forever to write my LORs anyway, and so I take forever to do this as well. So because I want to make sure that whatever I'm writing is helpful to the student. So I'm not sure if this is faster. I would still, to answer your question, still abide by the same timeline of giving the letter writer at least 4 to 6 weeks to be able to do a good job and be reflective in the letter they write. If the letter has been clicked through and it doesn't give me, so what is it that the program director is looking for? Let's say I'm not really looking for, in the ward, were they taking care of high complexity, low complexity? Now this one has that, the letter has those kind of check marks. I'm looking for skills, and I'm trying to look for different skills that the student has, different competencies. What is the student good at, really? What do they thrive on? What are their things that they're challenged with that I will have to help them with? So you're really looking for those things. And so this system helps you in capturing that information. But if it's not been done well enough, it's going to be as unhelpful as a 4-line LOR. So yeah, give your letter writers time. So there's a few questions, Omar, in the chat about who can write this LOR. So how many SEL formats can you have, or who writes it? I feel like if anyone who you worked with, who you feel like would be able to give you good information, they can use the IMSEL. And if they didn't observe you in the critical care setting, say, they can choose not applicable, or just leave that portion out. So multiple faculty can use IMSEL. You don't have to have one IMSEL necessarily. I don't think that the MSP or the dean's letter should be in the IMSEL format. It should be your clerkship letter or your LORs that are coming from your clinicians.
Okay, thank you. Sadiq bhai, I think he raised his hand. I'll let him make a quick comment.
Yeah. So
and if you don't mind, we'll take all the questions at the end. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Go ahead, Sadiq.
So I think to address to what Sarah was saying, Sarah was saying, I think, a few things, IMSEL does not replace, and please value Sarah's opinion more than me, because I'm a psychiatrist and I just got to learn about it by reading about it. So I think SEL does not replace Dean's letter and MSPE. It does replace Dean's LOR or Chair's LOR that was required by some PD, some programs in the past. Who can write it? If I start with the very basic level, anyone who has worked with you for more than 8 weeks can write it. I also saw a question by, I think, Sham, that, the issue about the timeline is that most people who do clerkships, they are at least in IM clerkship for 8 to 12 months. So you need this much time to know someone. That would be very basic, that, anyone can write it. But the next level would be if it comes from someone who has worked with you in internship for that time period, that person can write it. The next level would be in Pakistan, we really don't have chair of medicine in many medical colleges. We have head of departments, HODs, so those HODs can write IMSEL. Now, if you do have a chair of medicine, then it is preferred that it should be written by chair. there is one chair and multiple people who are interested in internal medicine. Let's take an example of American medical graduates. So chair does not have to meet with individual candidates and judge their competency. The clerkship directors can provide that info to chair to write SEL. So I think, and another thing that we need to remember, we were talking about timeline. I think your letter of recommendation is going to be given as good of time as the time given by you to your LOR writers. So for any LOR writers, I would suggest that, give it about 6 to 8 weeks, because people are really busy. Like, if you see there are 5 panelists here, 2 of them are on call, right? So people are always doing something. So give them enough time to put, a thoughtful letter for you together rather than writing in the moment, and that will come as very generic letter. I will be happy to answer, any questions as we move forward.
Thank you, Sadiq bhai. Moving on to Dr. Gulraiz Ahmed. He's here. We'll listen to his thoughts on SEL. Gulraiz, if you can join us, please. Gulraiz, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay, please, go ahead.
So what was the question? I'm sorry. I also am on baby duty right now, and there was an explosive diaper. So that
if you need 2 minutes, we can come back to you later. That's totally
Sure.
fine, brother. Okay. All right. So I have a question for whoever can answer. One thing I noticed in good letters, really good letters, there was a personalized touch. You work with someone for especially for research. I noticed that, like, if you work with someone for 1 to 2 years, the mentor will write really good letters, and that will a lot of that letter is actually focused towards the personality of the mentee. And he's an honest, punctual guy. He's a self-starter. He's a leader. He's able to follow directions once given some. Like, there were all these comments. Do you feel that with more objective approach of this going away? I know there are places that you can just type in information. Is that one thing that you're concerned about? We'll start with Dr. Gyani. Sarah, if you can answer that, please.
Umar, I think that I agree with you that those real conversations, like, I wish instead of a letter, I just had the phone number of the people and I could just call them and, hey, tell me more about this person. So,
Right.
really, any letter that is written in a conversational kind of style and really tells me authentically what the person is, what their strengths are, it's always preferred. So a format is always less important than the content. So certainly that goes without saying. Do we have systems of capturing that information or relaying that information? Do different people have different styles of being able to articulate? Of course they do, right? And so you may have had a great applicant who's worked with the attending, and the attending absolutely loves them and thinks that they're amazing, but they're not really naturally, someone who would be articulate in explaining that, and that would do the disservice. So I think the standardized approach helps stabilize that. Do we have good systems of capturing student competencies through a longitudinal experience to be able to articulate it effectively? We don't have it right now. I wish one of the things that we've done and I've asked because for my research, really, other program directors, is if you had a FICO score or a GPA for a skill that you think is the most important, which one would it be? And interestingly, one of the things that came, and this is not just IM, all different specialties, program directors, what they said was learnability. That if I could have a score or some kind of numerical or some kind of information of how eager is this child to learn or how adaptable or flexible they are, that would be the most important thing. We don't have it. And so we're trying to make do with these surrogates. Sadiq, just to kind of clarify for the students who are here, you explained it very well that this doesn't replace the MSPE or I think it wouldn't even replace the dean's letter, to be honest with you. This would be a structure for the LORs that you are writing. So imagine like whatever LORs, if you want to upload 3, 4, however many, if you could, if you wanted, use this format for those LORs. I would encourage the dean's letter to be however the dean's letter is, or the MSP, of course, to follow whatever your standard MSP format is.
Yeah, and you're correct. It does not replace dean's letter. What I was saying, it replaces dean's LOR. So it does not replace MSP or dean's letter.
Yeah, there are certain terminologies in our med schools back home. Dean's LOR is an LOR from the chair of medicine, and dean's letter is MSP. So it kind of like a little bit confusing. I don't know why we have them, but that's how it is.
Gulrez, quick question from you. Do you think if an IMG, we already partly answered it, so just quickly getting your opinion on this. Do you think if an IMG cannot get an SEL, do you think it's going to affect them negatively?
Not really, because firstly, it's not mandatory. Secondly, I would like an SEL to be written by somebody with whom you have worked for at least 2 to 3 months, which essentially means you do your house job. And a lot of people who are coming in are not doing their house jobs. And our clerkships are not as well integrated as a US system. So I don't think an SEL, not having an SEL will be a big problem, because yes, as Dr. Kiani kind of already pointed it out, if she has to decide between 2 candidates who are super close with their credential, it might make a slight difference. But would it get them an interview? No, it will not get you an interview. Your LORs, your SEL will be reviewed once your application has been opened, and your scores and other credentials will be the one that will decide that.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much. So quickly, just to summarize for our audience, so you need to work with someone for 8 weeks at least, right, before you can get an SEL. Second, the SEL, as everybody pointed out, comes from the chair. Third thing, you can either have a letter of recommendation or an SEL, right? You can't have both from the same person, right? So you can have, let's say, if you're getting 4 letters, you can use 2 SELs, 2 letters, or you can do 1 SEL or 3 letters or all 4 SELs, whatever. But one person can only do either one. You can't have a person do both letter of recommendation and SEL.
Omar,
yeah, go ahead.
It doesn't
Please.
need to necessarily come from the chair.
Okay.
Yeah, it could come from a clerkship director, and it doesn't necessarily have to come from an experience that was for 8 weeks.
Yeah, so if somebody's working for 4 weeks, can that work?
It's the quality of the experience that matters. And that's why I explained to you earlier that, even in internal medicine clerkships, when I'm interacting with a student, I only worked with them 1 or 1.5 week of the entire 8-week block that they had. And so we're getting data from different, different experiences, different faculty, and then putting it together, and the clerkship director usually puts it together. So I wouldn't say that you necessarily have to have, if you have worked for someone, let's say 6 weeks or 4 weeks, but it was a very good quality experience, it would not be possible for them to give you this letter. I wouldn't. It's just a format.
Perfect. Thank you. I appreciate it. I noticed that, like, during my time as a student, as doing electives, I noticed that, you work for 20 days, 20 weekdays in a 4-week time period. And in those 20 days, like 3 attendings changed. And you work with someone for 8 days, 4 days with another person, 6 days for another person. So you never really formed that connection working with someone for 8 days or something like that. But it's the like you pointed out, it's the content of the letter and the quality of time spent together. Sometimes you work with someone for 3 shifts, but you have a long discussion on cases, you discuss, research on a topic, and that person gets to judge your level of education, your level of interest. That person might be better suited, so I feel like I always tell people who are seeking out to me for mentorship that what truly matters is how much of a bond you formed with your mentor. How much talks did you have? Especially if you sit together and eat lunch, that's a big thing, like that means you reach that comfort level, and I would have you reach out to that mentor and ask them to write you an SEL oral letter. So last question before we reach out, we look at our questions and we go from there. Just a reminder to everyone, this session is live telecasted on APPNA Merit. Please subscribe to it, like the video if you find this helpful, and you can post your questions in the YouTube live chat. And we're also looking at the questions in the Q&A. So last question, currently SEL is exclusively for internal medicine, right? Can we see it extending to other specialties next year?
So I think, besides correct me, other people if I'm wrong, emergency medicine already has been using it for many years. Whether it will come to other specialties, I don't know yet, because it is not, globally even implemented in internal medicine too, right? I listened to a webinar by Dr. Ibrahim on SEL, and I believe the data they shared, about 30 to 40% of the PDs used it in 2021, last year match. So I think people are still waiting to see what happens and, how to go from here. But a lot of things have changed, because some other specialties were doing this. For example, NRMP2 phase match process, that is done by some specialties. So we don't know it as of yet whether it would be implemented by other specialties, taken up by other specialties.
All right, moving on to our questions. And at the end, I'll share some resources that are provided. That shows this template of SEL was looking at by the AIM. So starting with our questions, it says, can any attending this question is by Hafsa Javed, can any attending physician who we have worked with write an SEL, or it has to be written by Dean of Medicine? I think we already answered that anybody who you have worked with. A question that has already been answered about the time limit. There was a question minimum 8 to 10 weeks, as Sarah already answered that, there is no minimum time limit. Next one is, what's the worth of Dean's LOR compared to SEL, especially if one has already gotten Dean's LOR and 3 US LORs? I don't think we can compare them, right?
So I think, Umar, this person asked about Dean's LOR. So compared to SEL, so I would go with SEL because this is required among internal medicine PDs. So I would probably go with SEL that is being asked, unless a program specifically asks for Dean's LOR. That's my opinion on it.
Sarah, do you want to add something to that?
Mm-hmm. Well, the quality and the content of the Dean's LOR also matters. So if the Dean's LOR is just a generic explanation of what rotations a student does, and it's not giving any more information than what was present in the MSPE already, because it wasn't, that person doesn't really know you, I'm not sure what the value of the Dean's LOR would be. Now, there's some institutions like back home, I graduated from Aga Khan University, and so our Dean's LOR is really strong. They put in a lot of effort and they includes feedback from it. So our Dean's letter is usually something that is absolutely different, and it supplements the MSP. So it really depends on what kind of institution you're from and what kind of Dean's letter you're getting. And often you will, even though those letters are waived, you can go and kind of talk to your Dean's staff and get a sense of what is the letter, what is the content going to be like. So I wouldn't, it's difficult to say that, does it replace that or not? I do think that this is a nice format to use for general letter writers. There was a question in the chat also about,
sure,
you've done a inpatient rotation, but you don't have ICU experience, or you didn't do the outpatient rotation with someone. Can you still follow this SEL? Again, this is just a structure for you guys, for the letter writers. So they can definitely use this and just leave those portions blank or omit them. Really, you can copy this into a Word format and just delete those sections, right? Or say not applicable, because in the explanation of the experience, you can say that it was a 4-week inpatient rotation. or award rotation in which I did this, in which the learner did this is. So I think it's fine. It's just a template. So you can certainly use that. Now, is a letter that only has an outpatient experience as good as another letter that has all three? I don't know. Again, it's difficult to compare because I don't know what the meat of the letter is. What is that person saying? So I think I couldn't agree more with Omar when you said that the meaningful interactions with your mentors and having like really authentic information in there is the key.
Right. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Next question.
I
we
have a
is-
comment as well, Umar bhai.
Please,
The
please. go
thing
ahead.
is, this is just a template to kind of structurize the LOR. There is no big science behind it with respect to like why SEL over a standard LOR. I would say Dean's letter, like Dean's LOR from government medical schools mostly are very generic. They are not as good as what we think. And they are pretty much copy pasted for the whole class the same way, with just changes in their number and their class standing. That's the literally thing that they change in the Dean's LORs. So SEL makes things more objective. It makes things more standardized for people, especially letter writing is not everybody's strong game. Like, I'm not a good letter writer. I cannot write a good letter. So what this does is it objectifies the whole process of letter writing and puts them into different sections and makes the whole process easier and standardized for others. So if you can get a Dean's LOR in an SEL format, I think that will be the best thing. But if you cannot, then get an SEL from an attending, and that should be good enough as well.
Thank you, Gulraj. We'll go to Sadiq Bhai. He has his hand raised. Go ahead, Sadiq.
Yeah, so just to reiterate, I think people in the chat are still asking about Dean's letter and Dean's LOR. Both are different things. Dean's letter is an absolute requirement at this time. Along with MSB, SEL does not replace those requirements on your application. For SEL, anyone can write that letter. Anyone. It's whether you worked with someone in house job, whether it was a medical school clerkship director, whether it's a person in US who you worked with for significant period of time, with that relationship was formed and they can comment on it. Chair of medicine, even if that person has not worked with you, but a clerkship director can provide that info. Anyone can write that letter. It's about this content that goes into the letter that matters. So I hope this clarifies a lot of questions. So for IMGs, it can be house job person, your house job supervisor, your FCPS supervisor, your chair of medicine, your HOD, head of department. It can be someone who you work with observership about. So I hope that sort of summarizes.
Thank you. So then there's a question on how many SEL or how many letters we need to upload. What is it these days? It's 4, right? In total. And you can use any combination of SEL or letter. Then there is what is worth of SEL compared to LOL from department chair. I think we already addressed that, right? Okay. Then there is a next question by Nimra Claire. Hi, I believe my house job in Pakistan is a much better time when my HOD can fill in the SEL for me instead of med school clerkship. Is there a way to make this SEL about house job and not the clerkship? This, I think, has also been answered, right? That you can totally use this for your house job experience? Okay,
Yes.
Good. Thanks. Well, there's one more. Mohammed Hamza writes, as of now, I have 3 US LORs and 1 Dean of Medicine LOR. I plan to sign these to the programs which require Dean of Medicine LOR. If I manage to get an internal medicine SEL from one of my hometowns, home countries preceptors, should I replace that with one of my US LORs? Whoever wants to take this question.
If they're waived LORs, you really don't know what's in them, right? And so I can't answer that for you. It's going to be your own kind of leap of faith where you decide, okay, where was the information or the experience more meaningful, and which person will actually give the information that I wanted to the PDs. I can share my own experience. Now, I don't think that this would work for everyone. my application could have had things that your application doesn't have, and you have things that I didn't have. But when I was applying, which was also some time back, so Omar just said that things have evolved. I didn't use US LORs because I didn't feel like I connected with the people that I worked with, and I did 3 to 4 weeks of electives, but I didn't feel like it was as meaningful a connection as I had with my clinicians that I worked with back home. And so I took that leap of faith and used my experience from the clinicians back home. Is that something I would recommend to everyone? No, I don't, because there is some programs that are requiring LORs to come from a US physician, at least 1 or 2, if not all. So I don't think that I can answer that for you. That would go. It really is a leap of faith that you'll have to take.
Thank you. In chat, we have another question. As mentioned, USMDs don't have a lot of time. If you're getting a LOR from them, should we replace that and request an SEL? Then I risk losing my chance to get an LOR from them, and 3 LORs are required by most programs. This question is very intricate. Whoever wants to take it.
So I think you can ask for it, that to see if they can write, letter in an SEL format. There's nothing wrong with it, and it's almost start of August, so they still have about 6 weeks to go. So I will just ask for it, and just ask them to, write in SEL format if that is possible. So, but if you don't get it, that's fine too.
Yeah, I would try to get the LOR in on time. Applying on time is the most important thing that you can do. If the mentor is not if the mentor is not feeling easy writing an IMCEL, just get an LOR and get it done. I can also take the next question. Yes, if you did residency back home, you can ask your supervisor to write an IMCEL for you. That will be the best thing for you.
Perfect. And then there's this question by Al Subhani. So we can write all our 3 or 4 LOR in SEL format. Yeah, right? I think so.
Correct.
Yes.
Then there's a general question, which whoever can take it, the AV. How bad is a 3rd or 4th quartile of performance on your MSPE?
I think this should go to the PD.
Sure.
So it's a loaded question. So do I look at MSPE? Always, I do. Do other program directors look at MSPE? Always, they do. So 3rd, 4th quartile does not help, certainly. But what medical school you're coming from matters. What your step scores are matters. What your entire application is matter. I have certain friends who were in the 3rd or 4th quartile of Aga Khan University when I applied with them, and they matched into very competitive programs because they had great letters and they were very well-rounded people who were head of football and doing lots of extracurricular things. And so they had a very well-rounded application. And in their personal statement, they had really not tried to hide the fact. They had expressed, how their evolution happened as a person. And so I think that you have to be deliberate about it. You can't hide it. If you are 3rd, 4th quartile, that's the truth. But you have to talk about it authentically in terms of, you can choose to hint about it in your personal statement in terms of not as a weakness, but rather who you are as a person and how you've evolved, right? So that the concern about 3rd and 4th quartile is that nobody wants to hire someone who will be a challenge in terms of passing boards. Really, if you're a good person and if you're reliable, you care about your patients, I'm happy. I don't really care if you were 3rd or 4th quartile as long as you have good work ethic. But sometimes it is a concern to us that is this person going to have trouble like that? So as long as you can explain that, I think should be fine.
Thank you. And I'll add to that I was a 3rd, 4th quartile student from KMU, actually. So I'll tell you, I think everything has its value, right? The question is not that, is this bad enough that would keep me from matching? That's not for anything. Even if you have low scores, even if you get an attempt, none of this will prevent you from matching. There are ways to fix it. It's the values are relative. If there is somebody who has low scores but has 4 years of research experience with 100 publications, 50 publications, with multiple abstract presentations, that person is very different. Nobody's going to care about their low score in physiology exam or second year, third year. People are going to look at, okay, this guy has so many publications, awards, abstract, and has decent score. So the value is relative as compared to someone who doesn't have any experience, doesn't have any electives, any clerkships, no letters. In that case, that's all they have. So the value of MSP is relative. And then as a PD, you're supposed to look at something that is provided. So you have to be judged on some metric. If there are no other metrics, like I said, step one, unfortunately, is pass-fail now, right? So now the importance of step 2 CK score and possibly step 3 score is more. People are going to rely more on step 2 CK score and step 3 score to see which IMGs are better. Just like that, if there is somebody who had in their MSPE better evaluation, better MSPE performance as compared to someone who was bad, and there is anything, no US clinical or research experience to supplement it or fix it, then unfortunately you're stuck with that. That being said, I will specifically tell you, you write in your comment, you're from King Edward. Brother, I know the pain, I know how it is. And let me tell you from experience, every year we have 50 to 60 students matched from King Edward. Just do the basics right, you try to take exams in time, get good scores, write a good personal statement, get your good letters, try to get some experience, and you'll be fine. Half of the King Edward comes with the performance like that. Don't worry. So Sadiq has a comment. Please go ahead, Sadiq.
No, I just want to reiterate and re-emphasize what you and Sarah and Omar, what you said. I think we keep saying it is the whole package that matters, right? So one thing's not gonna ding you. I can talk about one of my batchmates who started and failed annual exam and then took that, but had multiple failure in annual exams. He did great on USMLEs. He did internal medicine from a university program. He did critical care fellowship. So I think it's not that, one thing, if you have one red flag that's going to ding you in your pursuit of medicine and your journey, is in more or less, it also talks about your adaptability and your resilience, right? Whether when you have, let's say a low USMLE score or a failure on exam, whether you're sitting in muck with it, whether you're sort of crying over it, or whether you said, okay, fine, I'm just going to look at my failure. I'm going to do an assessment of my failures, make a sort of see what I can do better and move from there. So that's what matters. So it's adaptability, it's resilience, it's your ability to learn. That also tells me, next time if an attending gives you feedback, you're not going to throw punches on that attending. You're going to listen to it, you're going to reflect on that, and you're going to make progress from that. To moving into SEL, I think just to re-emphasize, SEL is a letter. It's uploaded among other letters. If you want to upload an SEL or from chair of medicine or whoever, you can only assign 3 more LORs. If you decide to assign SEL from a chair of medicine or whoever.
Thank you, Mr.
Umar bhai, while we have Dr. Kiani with us, I just want to know her experience last year with step 1 being pass and fail, and how was her experience last year with it? And was there any preference given to people who already had a step 1 score?
That's a good question. Thank you, Gulriz, for that. No, we didn't have, but a lot of, we interview quite a lot of IMGs. So a lot of the people who applied to our program had taken step 1 already, inadvertently, because of the demographic of the people who applied to our program. And similarly for American graduates as well, we had people. This year, do we intend to weigh that positively that a person has a step 1? No, because because most recent graduates will not have it, and so I don't think this should dissuade them from or disadvantage them, certainly. What is the truth is for our medical school, our average step 2 score used to be 240, and it's increased to 255 this year. So there is a score inflation. Average score is 255, which used to be back in the day a really good score, right? 255 step 2 score used to be considered a really good. So now, since that's the new average, I do think there is score inflation, and so we will be looking at a holistic understanding of, you know, what the applicant is. So just because the average is moved to 255, am I only looking at 270s? Not at all. Really, honestly, at the end of the day, scores tell me of your ability to do well under pressure and recall facts. Really, that's the two skills, and those two skills are really important for physicians, but there are also other skills that are important. I couldn't agree more with Sadiq in his description of resilience. And so, for example, I've had, you know, you give opportunities to different types of applicants. And so if an applicant, say, has multiple failures or some 1 or 2 failures, we don't have a lot of people who have multiple failures because it's so competitive. Let's say you were on the lower quartile, or your step 1 score, let's say in the past was low. And so here I am talking to you or having a conversation. So the moment that you see that, I'm looking for an explanation for that in your personal statement. If you haven't done that, either you're trying to trick me into thinking that, okay, maybe she didn't look at that and I'll just kind of, that doesn't work, right? So I would really, if you have a red flag on your application, like a failure, a disciplinary issue, a really low score in something, I would want you to have explained that, or at least, you know, showed me what you learned from it, what you want to do, and how you're committed to, you know, working on that, or how you bypass that or gotten over that already in your personal statement, because that's the opportunity for you. Also, you have your supplementary application as well, right? Not is that required from everyone? Not really. But if you feel like you want to explain certain things and you want to talk about it, you have supplementary application there as well, in order for you to, that is an opportunity for you to explain things and kind of talk to me. At the end of the day, it's really about authenticity, honesty, integrity, just having a growth mindset. Those things really matter.
Thank you very much. And I'll add to that you know, from my experience, from my conversations with multiple PDs, 2 of the most important things, and I'm sure Sarah would agree, that 2 of the most important things that PDs are looking for is teachability to a student, how learnable you are, which you already mentioned, and ability to take feedback. You know, are you going to get really upset when we tell you that, okay, you're unable to do a procedure, you need to spend more time practicing it, or you need to spend more time learning one specific skill? So just be very mindful of these 2 things. You know, it's very important for us as mentors to feel comfortable giving you feedback, because that is the only way you can improve, and that is the only way you can learn. Since we were talking about the overall performance and if there are any red flags, I'll tell you about my personal experience. You know, my professional journey has been very much like Pakistan cricket team. You know, you do very good one moment, and then all of a sudden you lose a critical wicket, and then you're like, oh my God, another red flag. But I have an entire YouTube channel, and my main trailer is talking about the entire journey, how I overcame, and that is what I did in my interviews and personal statement, and I think it really helped. You know, that's why I have this entire resilience series on my channel, because it's everybody. You would think that there are people here who don't have any failures. Each one of us have failures. We all have setbacks. They're of different nature. Some people have it on personal level, some people have it professionally, some people have it on family levels, right? So we all have different setbacks. What truly matters is how you overcame those challenges. Right. Sadiq Bhai has raised his hand. Sadiq Bhai, please go ahead.
No, I just want to share one of my failures. So I failed my final year exam, but I passed it. And, you know, it was a huge setback because I thought I was very well prepared, but life happens, right? And, you know, it is, we would take very subjective exams, but, you know, I didn't do well in oral exams, and partly it was my failure too. Not partly, all of it was my failure. And I did take, you know, my scores were average, but after that, you know, I was able to overcome. That was a shock for a few years. So I think, you know, all of us have failures. None of us are perfect. It's the whole complement of things on your exam application that matters. So I think just reflecting on your failures, that's the key thing. and how can you make progress from there.
Thank you, Sadiq. Let's not go into personal failures. Meri list काफी लंबी है. Sarah, I have a quick question. One last question from me personally. Let's say somebody has a setback, right? Let's say somebody had an attempt in CS when there was one, or a failed an exam, or low score, right? You said that it needs to be addressed in your personal statement. So I have a question. How do you address it? Because that is something I have, had trouble guiding my students, like for the past 10 years. That how do you address that in a way that doesn't look like you're trying to whitewash it, justify it, or not appear like you're not owning it and just ignoring it, but and at the same time not saying, okay, yes, actually this is right, and I am not a good student. How do you do that diplomatically and politically correctly?
Well, you've asked a very difficult question to me. So, I think the advantage, and what I'm telling my students right now who I'm mentoring, is that now you have the advantage of having the supplementary application. So the supplementary application has these like 5 different, gives you opportunities to talk about 5 different experiences or 5 different things that you kind of, and usually it's in the context of experiences with different faculty members or that were transformative for you. But really it could be, you could use those opportunities to write about, a setback as well. And not kind of take over your personal statement in which you want to talk about something different. But if you had it depends on what the degree of your failure is, firstly. So if you're from KE, and now I know that KE is very competitive, and so you will, if you're in your 3rd quartile and you have multiple other things, is that something you must explain? Perhaps not. It's okay. But if you have like, for example, I had an applicant who had in the scores in the 190s in step 1. But their step 2 score was in the 250s. And so it wasn't consistent, right? And so that discrepancy is something you may want to explain, right? And also, if you overcome it, you can talk about, you don't need to explain why the 190 something happened, but these were this is how you can use that example to talk about your growth mindset and how you can overcome challenges. Just like Gulrez, my kids are also, they're ready for their mom to come and get back to them.
We're almost at the end. Just quick question. I think Sadiq already answered. An American physician recommended me to get LORs from those who observed me at work, not from those who I only shadowed, because they were able to see how you interacted with patients, even if they're LORs from back home. Do you people agree? I think the answer is relative. If there is somebody like, I'm sorry, I'm taking this question first really quickly. If there is somebody like Sarah, who is, or me, or Sadiq, see, we know the Pakistani system. We come from Pakistan. So we know that very rarely, unfortunately, there might be things might be better at Afghan, but a lot of times, for the letters are just generic. So in that case, that's a concern. A lot of people can get generic letters from Pakistan, and that is the concern. But if there is somebody who writes you a true letter of recommendation, it shows. I had somebody from Pakistan who took his time and really commented about my skills, my personality. Then it shows that this is a personalized letter as compared to a generic letter. So I would say somebody writes you a personalized letter, it would really help you. That being said, in my experience, it's very, very challenging to get a personalized, individualized letter from Pakistan. And that's why it's important, because in US, most of people write individualized, personalized letter. They're not that much relatively, I would say, generic letters. So that's, I think, Sarah, would you?
No,
go ahead,
I have a question for you guys, because I don't look at things. I don't know what the applicant side of the application in ERAS is. Is the IM-SEL something that is listed separately, or is it just a format for you? My understanding was the IM-SEL is available for faculty to download and kind of use and upload just like any other LOR. Is that correct?
So,
Yes, that's how it is.
Yeah, AAIM has, some SEL mock or template letters, which you can download and tweak, and then you can share it, under your LOR. So I think the rest of process is similar to, how you upload LOR, how you invite LOR writers.
Okay, so the reason why I asked this was because some of the questions from the students almost felt like, Do I use LOR? It really is a template. So say you did an observership that was not hands-on, it was telemedicine or something like that, but your letter writer felt that they connected with you, they have, you know, good things to say about you. It's a template. You're welcome to use it. You're welcome to modify, you know, certain portions of it. And it does, I have it here, and it does talk about what was the interaction like, right? So if, as long as you're explaining, that should be fine.
Yeah, correct.
Yes, it's just a
Everybody see my
structure
screen?
to an LOR, and it is uploaded in the LOR section. As Sadiq already pointed, it replaces the standard LOR. So it will be there, and you can only add maximum 4 that can be attached to your application. One more comment, Umar bhai, before you move on. Experiences back home are never taken as a negative thing. Please don't think that US experience is the only thing that will get you through into US residency. Experiences during your house job, experiences during your medical school are no less than any other experience across the world. Only problem that Umar bhai already kind of like pointed out is the LORs that we get from these rotations are very generic. If you can convince your mentor, your preceptor, your senior to write a personalized letter, that would go a long way. I used 2 letters from Pakistan and I used 2 letters from US. People only talked about my Pakistan LORs during the interview because they were so well written. So it totally depends upon what's written in the letter.
And one thing that can be done is, because, you know, one thing that PDs are looking for is the ACGME core competencies, right? That they are really important. So you can send them a list of, you know, ACGME core competencies so they can write those letters. I'm not talking about SEL, but any other letters. If they know the ACGME core competencies, they can sort of address those points in letter, which is, you know, patient care, professionalism, interpersonal skill, and blah, blah, blah. So I think, you know, as when you ask for a request for a letter of recommendation, just send them ACGME core competency list. And that you can probably Google it, you know, it's available widely.
Thank you, Sadiq. So just a quick comment, as everybody can see, can you guys see my screen? Okay, so I will share all these links in the chat as well as in the description of the YouTube live video. So this is just showing the structure of the SEL that you can use. And I think they also show a template. I think it has like what kind of stuff should go in there. And there is also an FAQ section. We didn't go into this because these are the resources that are already available. You can review them at your convenience. And if you have any questions, you can post them in the YouTube comments and we'll try to address them. Any other questions in the chat?
I think I'm seeing some other question, but let's stay focused on SEL today, and maybe we can, you know, plan for another session to discuss other areas too, and we can always invite, you know, Sarah back, and hopefully she can serve on as one of the panelists. Yeah, I have to go because I have another webinar at 1 o'clock, and I need to complete my rounding. But just remember, SEL can be written by anyone, and who you had meaningful interactions with is another LOR. So if you assign that, you can assign only 3 more LORs. It does not replace Dean's letter and MSPE, but it does replace. It can replace Chair's letter and Dean's LOR. But remember, it really depends on how personalized one letter is. So just go based on that. I'll take off, but thank you very much again, Umar, and you know, Sarah and Gurez, please continue. Thank you very much.
Thank you much. I think we're at the end. We pretty much answered all the questions. Yeah, we already said that any attending can answer that. And I don't think, just very quickly, Sarah, score of 239 is not a red flag, right? There's this question that 239, no, it's not a red flag, sorry. All right, so we're done with this. Thank you everyone who could join us, especially on a Sunday morning. I know we all have kids and we are on calls and we're busy. So I really appreciate, especially our panelists, and thank you to whoever took the time to listen to us. Like I said, you can post your questions in YouTube comments and we will try to answer them. Thanks everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.